Anthony slid a glass of hot tea towards himself and stretched his legs blissfully. The business trip had been stressful, with hardly a minute of spare time. Now, under the rhythmic sound of the fast train's wheels flying along the tracks, he could finally relax a little. Outside the window flashed yellow-green islands of red autumn, his favourite time of year, when the heat had already passed and the cold had not yet begun to assert itself. The business conference was held in a seaside city, where desperate daredevils still plunged into the chilly sea with burning eyes. Old imposing palm trees on the picturesque pedestrian promenade shook their heads. The sun generously shared its warmth, not even considering relinquishing its position. It was a shame that he admired all this only from the window. The entire conference this time was built around his opening presentation. He couldn't leave his colleagues and go for a walk in a subtropical resort. Dr. Anthony Wheeler was a celebrated surgeon with the traits of a true inventor. He always remembered that on the operating table he held another life in his hands. Therefore, if a patient's condition became critical, he saved them in the most unexpected ways, thinking on his feet about how to prevent the patient from slipping away. Studying the protocols later, his colleagues first grabbed their heads, then acknowledged his decision was brilliant. Anthony treated the worship among the sick with a smile. He always refuted tales that he was some kind of miracle worker, trying to quell the surrounding excitement. The pesky admirers of his medical talent retreated temporarily until the next extraordinary incident. When the hospital was visited by a wealthy or particularly elite, they always insisted on surgical services provided personally by Dr. Wheeler, not considering other doctors as specialists. The famous doctor always cut off all such attempts, taking on only those situations that truly required his expertise. He managed to explain everything to everyone without unnecessary scandals. Even local bosses and bigwigs listened to him. Dr. Wheeler's authority was unquestionable. And so there he was, quiet and calm, sitting peacefully in the private compartment, wearing a sports suit, his face relaxed and unguarded. Like this, he was seen to no one except those close to him, his wife Sarah and son Casey. For his family, he was ready to humble his tough character and give his heart and soul. Take it, use it. He had no pity for himself when it came to them. Anthony looked at his watch, and at that moment he heard footsteps in the corridor and a loud voice. "Is there a doctor here? We need help." The doctor's professional instincts reacted instantly. Anthony rushed into the corridor of the carriage. "What happened? I'm a doctor, a surgeon. Who's sick?" Two panting conductors halted abruptly. "There is a pregnant woman in the 7th carriage. I knocked to ask is everything okay, and she didn't answer. I opened it and she was lying on the floor, curled up in a pool of something. We're running to the head of the train to report this unusual situation. We need an ambulance at the station." Anthony stepped back to his compartment, grabbed his medical bag, which he never parted with, and said to the excited women, "Lead the way. Show me where the expectant mother fainted. One of you come with me, the other go to the boss. Why are you doing everything in pairs? One of you should have stayed with that woman in the compartment. Maybe she's already regained consciousness." Dr. Wheeler walked briskly along the corridor of the carriages, hoping that everything wasn't as critical as it seemed to the conductor. The pregnant woman had indeed regained consciousness. She looked up at him and muttered, "I'm going to be a mum, and I'm at 38 weeks. I twisted from the pain. I thought my water broke early and contractions began. My name is Isabel." She made an effort to speak, but fell unconscious again. Dr. Wheeler examined the woman in labour, The situation was quite bad. She couldn't be transported anywhere, and there was no good labour activity yet. Anthony turned to the conductress. "Prepare the compartment for the delivery. Treat all surfaces with alcohol. I need maximum sterility. And gather a stock of bandages, absorbent cotton and gauze. Mine won't be enough." Isabel stirred on the floor. She regained consciousness again and whispered, barely audibly, "In the outer pocket of my big bag is my medical documents, a notebook with my mum's coordinates in the city. She has my eldest son living there now. Contact them, whatever happens to me."
"I'll do everything," the man assured her, and thought to himself, "Girl, your baby chose not a good time and place, but I'll do my best to help both of you. Believe me."
The second conductor, who had gone to fetch the head of the train, returned accompanied by a portly man with a good-natured face. He immediately burst into a flurry of urgent questions. "Doctor, dear sir, what's wrong with the passenger? What do I tell the dispatcher? It's still over 3.5 hours to the nearest station. The road is surrounded by forest and mountains. We can't expect any help here. All hope is in you, our saviour." At this moment the conductor arrived with a huge pile of gauze, bandages and absorbent cotton. The labour was difficult. Andrew even had to squeeze the baby out because the labour activity was faltering, and it was already threatening the life of both mother and child. Fortunately, both the doctor and the woman in labour coped, and everything ended safely. 2 hours later, Anthony cut the umbilical cord and handed the baby to one of the conductors. The baby was immediately wrapped in clean gauze. "A girl," the woman joyfully proclaimed. While Andrew began to work on Isabel, one of the conductresses looked into the compartment. "Doctor, can you examine the newborn? We know you're not a paediatrician or a neonatologist." We weighed her in the dining car on a technical scale. She's a big girl, 3.5 kilograms. But there may be an error in her length. I measured her with a tape measure. It came to 53 centimetres. Dr. Wheeler turned the little girl around. The girl appeared perfectly healthy at first glance. He almost handed her back to the boyish conductor when his attention was drawn to a spot on the infant. Couldn't believe his eyes. It was a smooth, clear maroon wedge, just like his own, like his son Casey's. His decision was lightning fast. He would get off with his patient, escort her and the girl to the hospital, and stay with them for a couple of days. Thank goodness he had plenty of time off. Who would deny Dr. Anthony Wheeler a small vacation at his own expense, given such a sudden need? Anthony called work, and of course home, Sarah and Casey, explaining that he had an emergency on the train and needed to stay with a patient he had helped en route. After listening to her husband, Sarah hung up and informed her son, "Your daddy's saving the world again, this time in a train compartment. He'll be home in 2 or 3 days. That's just like him." In the Wheeler household, order and complete understanding reigned among all family members. Sarah stood by her husband as a true comrade in arms. They married in the first year of medical school, driven by profound mutual love. Each immediately realized that they had met their soulmate and would need no one else. They met in an amusing way. The gym teacher had organized a volleyball competition between girls and men's teams instead of regular classes. After the match, which ended in a draw, a friendly crowd poured into the locker rooms. Sarah, running late and flushed from the game, didn't notice the sign and dashed into the men's domain. Near a bench, almost without clothes, with his back to her, stood a young man, and he had a birthmark shaped like a maple leaf. Sarah caught only a glimpse of his surprised grey eyes before fleeing the locker room. When she rejoined her girlfriends, she looked dazed. They surrounded her, demanding details. But all she could say was, "The guys have a maple tree with only a leaf, but the maple itself is very handsome. You can't take your eyes off it." Her friends were baffled by her words and went about their business, but Sarah found herself longing to see the guy with the birthmark again. Love at first sight is definitely not a myth, is it? A day later, they crossed paths in the lecture hall. Anthony approached her, smiling warmly. "You ran away so quickly. I didn't have time to introduce myself. I'm Anthony," he clarified. "Anthony Wheeler. We have a lecture in the same room today. Mind if we sit together?" Much later, he confessed to Sarah that he had fallen for her the moment her pupils dilated at the sight of him in the locker room. A month later, Anthony and Sarah married, and 1 more month later, Sarah became pregnant. After that, they had a serious talk. Anthony insisted she take a sabbatical to care for herself and their future baby, but the girl proposed more radical measures. "A year of studying has shown me that medicine isn't my calling. I struggle to memorize medical terms, and when we helped nurses give injections, my hands shook. My parents rushed me into medicine, insisting it's always prestigious and in demand, but I've always loved sewing dresses for dolls and dreamed of becoming a fashion designer, dressing my mother and younger sister. I want to leave, stay home, and greet you after classes and later work. In my free time, I'll sew beautiful dresses for myself and clothes for our child. This is my aspiration, my heart's desire. There's a profession, to be near the man you love, to tend the family hearth, to keep the fire burning, and I would like to have such a job." Anthony gave full credit to his wife. Sarah excelled in her role as housewife and homemaker. She loved working in the kitchen and kept the house spotless. She sewed, knitted, and tastefully decorated their home. She kept up with modern trends, mastering the computer before him by taking courses. She maintained an interesting social circle and effortlessly raised their son Casey into an excellent young man with a knack for technology. From childhood he showed the potential of a young Edison, able to fix anything in the apartment, from toy cars to the microwave oven. There's a saying that early marriages don't last, but Anthony and Sarah had been together for over 30 years, never cheating or considering separation. So it happens. Their son Casey, however, was not so fortunate in his personal life. From childhood, the boy immersed himself in physics and math books, seemingly oblivious to girls. While he barely scraped by with a B grade in other subjects, Casey excelled in math and physics, effortlessly entering a technical university. By his second year, he was winning all young inventors' competitions, developing a passion for robotics. In his last year, he had already secured several patents for innovative ideas, leaving his peers far behind in career prospects. And then once, Casey met a woman at a robotics exhibition, a kindred spirit as passionate about technology as he was. They clicked instantly, understanding each other intuitively. 2 months later they married. Casey was elated, believing he'd found the woman he'd been searching for. They decided to postpone having children, both fully engrossed in developing robots. But 2 years later the unexpected occurred. Casey's wife fell for another technology enthusiast, also brilliant and talented. She didn't beat around the bush, laying her feelings out clearly. "Casey, I'd never want to hurt you, but I can't lie. I've met someone else, or rather, the one. Only with him can I truly breathe and live. You're a good husband, man and friend, but I can't help it. I'm leaving." Casey didn't make a scene or try to offend her. He let her go, enduring the pain, disappointment, and agony of irreversible loss. His trust in women shattered completely. Faithful companions like his mother, with her devotion to his father, seemed a relic of the past. At the station, a crowd gathered to see off and greet the train during its stop. As Isabel was carried out on a stretcher, the railroad crew bid farewell to Dr. Wheeler. An hour after Dr. Wheeler called his wife, the train arrived at the station. The train's head stood at the front and said, "Doctor, you'll be a legend on our train forever. You helped a woman under the clatter of wheels, practically single-handedly, with minimal resources. It's unbelievable, but I witnessed it myself." More and more railroad employees approached Anthony, trying to hug him, shake his hand, or simply touch him momentarily. A paramedic and a driver watched this appreciation from the ambulance. The driver, unable to contain himself, quipped, "Well, it's like seeing off a Hollywood star. They've just forgotten to roll out the red carpet." At the hospital, everything was ready for the distinguished guest's arrival. In the lobby, the head doctor bustled about, giving his subordinates final instructions. "Dr. Wheeler, we're delighted to welcome you to our modest medical institution. A hotel room has been booked for you. Would you like to rest after your sleepless night?" asked the chief doctor. Anthony turned sharply on his heels to face his colleague and replied with a slight smile, "I'll rest with my ward in her room, if you don't mind. I'll take on the role of her close friend. Her relatives are in another state. I'll contact them now." The chief doctor interrupted his speech mid-sentence, turned to the staff and gestured, "Dr. Wheeler, I've certainly heard that you're a man without a star complex or high ambitions, but to stay with the patient in the ward, you must have a good reason. However, it's your right. As a doctor, also in love with his profession, I understand you. Truly I do. I've been working with stethoscopes and syringes for over 40 years without tiring, and I'm still not satiated with medical work. I go home in the evening, but leave my thoughts in the hospital entrusted to me. There's a sofa in the ward, shower cubicle, toilet, appliances, including a TV. If you need an office for work, there's one too. The nursing station is right outside the door. Let's go, and I'll show you the room." In the room, Anthony dialed Isabel's mother, who answered immediately. "Good afternoon. I'm sorry I don't know your name. I'm your daughter's attending physician. Today, on the train, Isabel gave birth to a girl, but the labour was hard, and she is sleeping now. Neither her health nor the baby's is in danger now. However, we had to take them off the train before reaching your city. They're in the hospital. Can you come here?" Isabel's mother interrupted him before he could finish. "Are you crazy? I can barely keep up with Tommy, he's so fidgety, and you want me to take on my sick daughter? She's off to earn money and left me with a 3-year-old boy. She kept promising to take him back to her place, but she couldn't find the time. Now she's up to some new tricks. She was pregnant with her second child, too, and didn't say a word about it to me, the mother. I can't believe. Is she going to leave me another Kinder Surprise? No way. We didn't agree on that." Dr. Wheeler was dumbfounded by such a rebuff. Isabel's mother didn't ask what city her daughter was in, didn't inquire about her prognosis, didn't express concern about what had happened. She only gave him the coldness of anger and indifference. The doctor, accustomed to not being surprised by anything in life, and having faced death numerous times, concluded, "It seems not everything is rosy in Isabel's life. We'll have to deal with it." Anthony lay down on the sofa, watching his patient from the corner of his eye. He ensured everything was normal with her. He pondered that this transit stop was given to him from above for a reason, and he knew the first thing he had to do was find out who the father of his patient's child was. By evening, they were able to talk. Anthony was straightforward, neither hiding nor embellishing anything. He told the young woman that he had been drawn to the hospital by a wedge-shaped birthmark on her newborn girl. "Don't misunderstand me, Isabel. I wouldn't mistake that birthmark for anything.
I've seen it on my father, grandfather, myself, and my son. Such marks don't just appear without heredity. I need to know where your little girl's father is."
"I won't make a mystery of it, but I'm a little tired right now. If you don't mind, I'll tell you everything tomorrow morning. For now, I'll just give you a name. My girl's father's name is Casey." Anthony couldn't believe his ears, but Isabel had already begun to drift off. He realized he would get nothing more from her that evening. Before falling into a deep sleep himself, Dr. Wheeler tried to recall if Casey or Sarah had ever mentioned the name Isabel. Amid constant surgeries, business trips, and professional meetings, he often lost track of family happenings. He trusted Sarah's intuition and life experience implicitly. Recently, his wife had only worried about their son's divorce, as Casey refused to explain why he had split from his wife. Casey had moved back in with his parents from his rented apartment, throwing himself headlong into his work. Like his father, he only appeared at home late at night, laden with more electronics that he claimed needed night thinking. He'd joke, "I'll put it under my pillow. I hope I am lucky as Mendeleev, and maybe inspiration will strike in my sleep. His famous periodic table came to him in visions. How am I any worse?" Sarah had long made a habit of catching both men working in the evening to feed them hearty, calorie-laden dinners that defied the rules of healthy eating. In their family, it wasn't customary to pry into each other's affairs. Whoever wanted to share problems or news would do so voluntarily, and the name Isabel had never come up during these evening rituals. The morning greeted the city with a frosty chill and freshness, which was palpable as cold air seeped into the ward through the open window. Isabel, washed and even with a hint of colour in her cheeks, greeted Anthony with more calm and vivacity, if not quite joyfully yet. "Dr. Wheeler, good morning. Now I'm ready to tell you in detail about my brief affair with Casey." She began her story from the beginning, as Anthony had requested. She spoke openly, sensing that Dr. Wheeler wasn't driven by idle curiosity. "I was a late child, born when they least expected me. A gift to my mum at 38 and my dad at 42. 3 years after I was born, my father suffered a severe industrial injury that left his right arm paralysed. The arm was still there, but he couldn't use it. His fingers wouldn't respond. At 48, while hurrying home from the corner store, he was hit by a truck and died from his injuries on the spot. My mother worked as a cook in the factory canteen. By chance, right after the accident with my father, the chief engineer of the plant decided to send his wife to their summer cottage at the sea because she was tired of the harsh wilderness of our northern city. Together with her, he sent the cook, my mother. I fell in love with the sea at first sight, irrevocably and completely. Even in fall, winter and spring, when swimming wasn't possible, I could still admire it. I spent hours watching the vast body of water rush and breathe, rolling waves to the shore. My mum brought me an album and pencils, and I began drawing the sea. I'd sit on the shore for hours, never needing to be searched for. If I didn't respond when called, they knew I'd run off to the sea with my sketchbook. The summer house was located near the shoreline. My second discovery was the botanical garden. The chief engineer's wife had a season ticket, which she happily gave to me. The guards never stopped a 6-year-old girl. Among the flowers and greenhouses, I fell into a trance of endless admiration, drawing the graceful lines of buds and leaves. I'd spin around the feet of the staff, trying to participate in everything. I spent 3 years in this serene paradise. The climate was perfect. I never felt ill, and grew into a robust girl with rosy cheeks and a light tan. It was an enviable childhood. Then, like a thunderclap, change struck the high-ranking chief's wife. Her husband met a young, vivacious girl, a case of the legitimate wife being cast aside. My mother and I returned to our North City. My mother no longer wanted to work in the factory canteen. Unfortunately, a position as a barmaid opened up in the school canteen. My school years are almost memorable for the delicious raisin buns and dried fruit compote. Dr. Wheeler, during Isabel's monologue, looked at her carefully for the first time, not as a doctor, but as a man. She was cute, with medium-length blonde hair, a slight blush, grey-green eyes, thick eyelashes and beautifully shaped lips. Slim but not bony, she was pleasantly rounded where it mattered. People often described such women as not flashy, but nice, pleasant beauty that doesn't leave one indifferent. Isabel continued. I finished school with decent grades. I had long ago decided to become a landscape design specialist. My mum was horrified by my decision. Everyone shouted at me, "Isabel, come back to Earth. Our city hasn't a harsh continental climate. It's no place for your orchids and beloved wisterias. We don't live near sea or subtropical." I refused to listen. I flew south to study, planning to settle on the sea coast after graduation, to design landscapes for resorts, hotels and sanatoriums. Marriage derailed those plans. My husband was a bohemian type, a designer, musician and artist. He mocked my passion for drawing seascapes. When my landscape design won first place in a student competition, he took offence. "You never formally studied art, but you wanted to indulge your ambitions with sea pictures. Why did you even enter this competition? Did you want to outshine everyone else?" My husband was considered handsome at the college. Girls fell for him in droves. He had a nice voice, rock-star looks and shoulder-length hair that shone with a tarry lustre. You could drown in his piercing eyes, and I did, especially at night when we were alone. But he was in no hurry to become a father. At home he was malleable, soft, fluffy, loving my cutlets and fried potatoes, not hovering in the creative clouds. But behind the threshold he immediately changed, putting on a macho, charismatic mask. His heart and soul were, in fact, stale. But I only recognized this later, when my rose-coloured glasses shattered, my love-blinded eyes injured by the metaphorical shards. My son, Tommy, looks just like him. My husband and I lasted 2 years. I gave birth to my son alone in my hometown. Why do we girls always hurry back to our mother's wing? My mum is a good woman, truly. She may be loud and rough, but she's easy-going. She's always been that way with me. My husband accepted my decision to divorce with understanding. His eyes even lit up with a joyful gleam. Here it was, the long-awaited freedom. Vivacious girls in his entourage had long been waiting for him to indulge them with his male attention. For 2 years I lived with newborn Tommy at my mother's place, like a refugee. I got by on odd jobs. It's good that I had already graduated from the landscape school. The diploma became a useful substitute for recommendations. In the city, many detached cottages with spacious yards appeared. In summer, their owners wanted to spend time among exotic flowers and trees. A year ago, I received a call from a fellow student, babbling that the high beach season was over, it was time to earn money, pleasing the hotel administration with new landscape designs, while there were few vacationers. My mum didn't need much persuading. She understood perfectly that we barely made ends meet, and Tommy needed to be raised. The seaside city welcomed me with open arms. There were indeed many orders. After my city, a mild 17 degrees in December seemed like tropical heat. Trading frost and snow blizzards for a light jacket, admiring the sea and inhaling the aromas of flowering plants, I couldn't have dreamed of more. That's why I started working with enthusiasm. Isabel took a short break for rest. The memories stirred up many emotions in her. Dr. Wheeler also was silent, recalling his son's trip to the sea 9 months ago. Back then, Casey said to his parents, "That's it, my dear ancestors, I'm completely knackered. So many companies have ordered my latest model of home assistant robot that I even had to hire more employees in the assembly shop. I need a reboot. A winter-frowning sea with frequent storms, mountains propping up the sky, evergreen cypresses. That's what I need right now. I'm going to the seacoast. In the off-season, the prices aren't so steep, and there are fewer tourists. I'm not a fan of crowds and pandemonium." Meanwhile, Isabel continued. Casey came to me one winter evening, unexpectedly. I was standing near the sea station, indulging in my favourite habit of drawing the sea. That day it was frowning and gloomy, tossing a small ship with scarlet sails from one wave to another. Suddenly I heard an exclamation from behind. "Aren't you afraid for the passengers, who are fighting so desperately against the storm?" Without turning around, I replied, "There are 2 of them, so they'll manage. It doesn't matter where the ordeal takes us. It's who's there for us." We immediately struck up a vigorous conversation, with Casey as if we had known each other for 1,000 years. I liked his appearance. Short, thick hair and burning eyes with no trace of falseness. He began by sharing his feelings about my painting. "Your drawing struck me deeply. Your sea is alive. I even recoiled at first, feeling I might get wet from those fierce splashes. Where did you learn to feel this mysterious salty body of water so well?" I answered, "I've been in love with the sea since childhood, from the moment I first saw it. I feel we're of the same blood, the sea and me. It can read my thoughts, comfort or delight me, penetrate my soul or even reject me when it doesn't like my rigid attitude." Casey immediately picked up on my enthusiasm. "My parents and I also fly here to cure our souls. This time I found myself here alone. In 3 days I have to return home. My business, parents and friends are waiting for me there." I briefly told him about myself, that I came from the North City, that my son and mother were waiting for me at home, and that I was working here. He didn't disturb me at all, standing behind me and watching me finish the drawing. Naturally, we left the embankment together. In a building near a cavalcade of sprawling palm trees in this charming place, Casey had rented a cosy and stylish place. I had never noticed my tendency to follow a man like an obedient animal following a Pied Piper. With him, everything fell into place effortlessly, without conspiracy, by some mystical inertia. He calmly announced that after his wife left him, he no longer believed in pretty girls. I told him the story of my marriage. Neither of us expected anything from the other. 2 singles fell into a resort romance, without commitment. After dinner at a restaurant where we drank a bottle of champagne to toast our acquaintance, we moved to his room. I had a day off ahead of me. We spent almost 24 hours in bed, getting up only to make coffee and sandwiches on the go. A day later we ventured into the city. It had grown warmer, fluffy white clouds floated across the sky, and the sun shone generously again. Casey led me to the sea. I didn't feel like talking. What could we say to each other, having met at the right time in the right place to warm each other? We wandered along the promenade. I wanted to take a picture of him against the backdrop of shrubs with figurative topiary haircuts, but he gestured for me to stop. "You shouldn't, Isabel. If any visual traces of a resort romance remain, they unwittingly grieve the soul afterward. Remember me in your head. Take a picture of me mentally. Remember me as something random and excellent. I will do exactly that." You know, Dr. Wheeler, I was in complete agreement with him. I didn't even consider the possibility of getting pregnant, as if such an outcome, after passion at a resort, seemed impossible by definition. I didn't ask for details about his life, and he didn't seek my contact information. We existed here and now without making any plans for the future. I didn't see him off at the airport. No long farewells or bitter tears. I wasn't annoyed that things turned out this way. The only moment I felt a slight prick of impending emptiness was when I got in the cab to leave him, but I coped with it quickly. A week later, I was painting the sea at the same spot where Casey and I had met. Suddenly I realized, God, what fools we are, Casey and I, trying to prove something, show something, ignore something. I could see he liked me by the sparks of undisguised desire in his eyes, and he didn't seem like the kind of man who'd throw himself at every skirt. Pardon my frankness, but I had the impression that this man was made for me. Yet I persistently chased those intrusive thoughts away, but the truth remained. Immediately after his departure, I spent a few days in a mix of slight euphoria and sadness. Then unexpectedly, I found myself longing for him and scolding myself. Proud of yourself, trying on someone else's role so unlike you. You've never been a fan of such easy, uncomplicated connections. What's gotten into you this time? You should have asked him where to look, how to contact him, if you miss him. I didn't realize I was pregnant right away. There were no ailments at all, except for the standard physiological signs. I didn't experience a single day of morning sickness, weakness, or dizziness. All the tests in my medical record were perfect. That's why I went to my mum's so confidently 2 weeks before the due date. And here we are. I've given you a real headache and the whole train was disturbed. I'm so sorry. Having finished her story about the brief encounter with Casey, the woman calmed down, looking into the window. Dr. Wheeler was also lost in thoughts. He pondered, who has the right to judge such different kinds of love? This young woman liked my Casey, and what does he himself think about what happened between them? How will he take the news that he has a daughter? And does this fan of mechanical robots know how to love babies? And besides, where did Casey have his eyes? Isabel is such a good person, evident even after a short acquaintance. Not hysterical like some of my female patients, not trying to seem better than she is. She just lives her life the way she knows how. Straightforward, open, honest. Obviously decent. That's a rare combination in the younger generation these days. She doesn't wait for handouts from her man. She tries to achieve everything herself. After thinking a little longer and finally making up his mind, Anthony said, Isabel, I have a proposition for you. Before you answer, think carefully. Don't make a hasty decision. I have a son who had been at the sea 9 months ago. His name is Casey, and he has the same birthmark as your daughter. That's why I suppose you to go with me as the mother of my supposed granddaughter. For your peace of mind, we'll do a DNA test at my hospital right away. When we arrive, I'll rent a nice apartment for you and the girl. Later you can bring your son and mother from your city, if you wish. The young woman turned to him with evident surprise. Dr. Wheeler, your proposal truly seems strange and a bit awkward. We've known each other for barely 3 days, and you've already managed to save my life and learn all the details of my biography. You've even heard my mother's rebuke. Why do you need all these problems? Dr. Wheeler smiled as he objected. From the moment I saw your daughter's birthmark in the shape of a maple leaf, a kind of sign of our family lineage, I felt that, thanks to you, I now have an additional incentive to live and work. Sarah, that's my wife, and I have lived together for about 30 years, as they say, for better or worse. We've long dreamed of children's voices in the house, but Casey's personal life hasn't worked out so far. Now he has a chance to fix it. Isabel blushed scarlet. Do you really think things could work out between me and Casey? You know your son better than that. He told me he avoids all women now. I'm not likely to be the exception.
Anthony looked up at her. Everyone wants, I think, simple human happiness next to the person they love. You're different, that's a fact. He's a technician to the bone, passionate about his robots. You're creative, immersed in beauty, nature, the sea, flowers. Do you remember the law of physics, even a little? Opposite charges attract each other. A person too similar to us usually becomes boring quickly. And as they say in our city, you won't know if you don't try. Pack your things. It will become clear on the spot what course all our lives will take.
Isabel couldn't contain her emotions. She approached Dr. Wheeler and silently hugged him by the shoulders. I'll go with you, my doctor. I can't forget Casey. I want him to know that he has a daughter. Then, in winter, 9 months ago, Casey was flying from the sea coast to his town and desperately wanted to look his wife in the eyes once more. Now, after 3 days with Isabel, he finally didn't burn in the fire of pain or dwell on memories. He only rested his soul and body. Why did it seem to him after the divorce that his relationship with his ex-wife hadn't reached its conclusion? There remained unspoken words. Questions arose to which he couldn't find answers. He knew exactly where to find his ex-wife. The world of robot creators is small and everyone knows who's working where at any given moment. His wife now lived in the capital region. Her new partner was a nomad. He had invented something useful for the country's defense industry and was now in charge of testing. Right at the airport in his hometown, Casey changed the trajectory of his journey. He called his mother to say he was delayed, and 3 hours later he boarded a plane to the capital. He couldn't let go of the burning desire to talk to his wife once again, to find answers for himself. Without this, he couldn't move on or build a new relationship. On the airplane taking him to the capital, he remembered his chance passion, met on the seashore. He couldn't say he fell in love, but this woman had definitely touched some strings in his heart. Refusing the opportunity to exchange contacts with her, he now considered a mistake, a wrong decision that would be difficult to correct. He didn't want to waste any time in the capital. From the airport he immediately called his ex-wife, telling her he was passing through and would like to meet up. She didn't express surprise. They had parted on civilized terms. Casey didn't know how his impulse would end. He went to a quiet cafe, deciding to eat something and gather his thoughts in a peaceful atmosphere. His former favourite woman burst into the cafe like a whirlwind. Without hesitation, she hugged him warmly and looked into his eyes. "Are you still angry with me, darling? Come on, I even missed you. Seeing you now makes me pleased. Listen, my new partner, we haven't officially married yet. We're in a common law relationship. Let's go to my place, we can talk privately." They quickly took a cab to her apartment. Once upstairs, something happened that Casey had never imagined. His ex-wife pulled him into the bedroom. He couldn't resist. It was a strange encounter, part fight, part dialogue, an attempt to prove something to each other. Suddenly, Casey realized his soul was silent, his heart unmoved by her touch. Sensing his distance, his ex-wife propped herself up on her elbows and looked into his eyes. "Casey, what's wrong? Isn't this what you secretly wanted?" she asked, stretching like a contented cat. "In my boyfriend circle, intimacy isn't even considered a reason for a long acquaintance. If I told him now that I wanted to sleep with my ex-husband again, he'd understand. It's no strings attached." Casey recoiled, jumping up as thoughts raced through his mind. Was I really crazy about this cynical person? Did I consider divorcing her the end of my world? I have such a different view of relationships. Old-fashioned, maybe naive. I still want what my parents had, to go through life hand in hand with a soulmate, not changing partners at every crossroads. Something snapped inside him. He felt suddenly free from suffering, memories and regrets. He could close this chapter of his life and move on. The clouds cleared. He calmly enjoyed the coffee and cookies his ex-wife offered, regretting only that he had booked his return flight for the next day. He firmly refused her offer to spend more time together. Instead, he decided to walk around the capital. The next day, Casey was at the airport early. He appreciated its excellent infrastructure, the stores for last-minute souvenirs, the comfortable chairs near the cafes. He bought his mother a beautiful, stylish bag from an accessories store, then hesitated at the perfume counter. At first, he considered something daring and youthful for his father, but settled on the classic scent he had used for years. Near the woman's fragrances, he paused, wondering. What did Isabel smell like just a few days ago? The answer came easily. She smelled of the sea, sun, young cypresses, and a hint of mystery. Though she hadn't shared much about herself, the photos of her work in resorts had captivated him. Her flower arrangements and installations, coupled with sculptures by lesser-known artists, were as exciting and unusual as his own robotics work. He resolved to find Isabel in her town, certain there must be landscaping companies there. He'd track her down, no matter the cost. Casey returned to his city, upbeat. At home, no one questioned his delay. At work, he plunged into a sea of questions and minor problems, temporarily forgetting his plan to find Isabel. Months passed, but she wasn't erased from his memory. Her pretty face would appear in his mind during rare free moments, though constant fatigue quickly dispersed these thoughts. He didn't pursue new romances or pay attention to the numerous young women seeking his company. And so 9 months flew by after that brief holiday romance. And now Isabel herself came to Casey's town with his father and his newborn daughter. The result of the DNA test was expected. Casey was Letitia's father with a 99.9% probability. It was decided that it was time to tell Casey everything. That day, Sarah prepared a special dinner. Dr. Wheeler retrieved a bottle of 21-year-old Irish whiskey from the bar. Casey quipped that there hadn't been a suitable occasion to try it before. Seeing the bottle on the table, he mused, "I see you've prepared quite a surprise for me, ancestors. Well, I'm ready to hear you out." Sarah discreetly left the parlour, allowing the men to talk privately. After hearing his father's account of the train accident and his encounter with C girlfriend and her misfortunes, Casey was initially stunned. His thoughts whirled. He'd never imagined his casual seaside romance could lead to such dramatic events. Isabel's image flooded his mind, conjuring a tempestuous sea, hurling everything into the abyss, including a ship with scarlet sails. The young man suddenly resolved, "I'll be Isabel's prince, arriving in a yacht with scarlet sails. Such a woman deserves a protector, a man who'll love and support her for life." He didn't bother reading the DNA test results his father had placed before him. He simply took the note with Isabel and his daughter's address. "Don't wait up for dinner. I need to discuss everything with Isabel, and it won't be a brief conversation," he told his parents. The robot exhibition bustled with its usual energy. Curious journalists swarmed around its main organizer and visionary. Questions flew from all directions. "Mr. Wheeler, what inspired you to create these mini robots designed to befriend young children? What's their purpose? Babysitters? Educators? Companions? Is it true your little daughter has already assembled her first robot from your old construction set parts? Or is that just a rumour?" Casey gazed into the distance, where his wife strolled among the exhibits, holding 5-year-old Letitia's hand. 9-year-old Tommy's whereabouts remained a mystery to both him and Isabel. As the press conference concluded, Casey requested a moment with one of the more persistent correspondents. To everyone's surprise, he delivered an uncharacteristically long monologue. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm delighted to welcome you to this exhibition showcasing my new series of unique robots. Now, I'd like to thank my family. This is my wife, Isabel, my son Tommy, and my daughter Letitia. With them, I've learned the true meaning of what chemists call acid-alkaline balance. It's simple. I bound to work in the morning and race home in the evening, where I'm always warmly welcomed." Isabel Wheeler stepped onto the improvised stage, followed by Letitia, and then by a shaggy-haired Tommy, clutching some metal component. Casey could only think, I wonder where he's already managed to unscrew that from. He's just like me. And they say abilities are only transmitted by blood. Genetics lie. Everything happens differently.